within the Defender suite of products is Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, and it's meant to be antivirus, anti-malware, and then also the next generation, which is an acronym EDR, which is Endpoint Detection and Response. In our last blog and webinar, we talked about Plan 1 becoming the new kind of starting point for a business if they just need what's in green, which is next generation antivirus, anti-malware, plus some attack surface reduction, where you can utilize the Windows firewall, plus some of the other features of Windows 10 and 11 Enterprise to shut down certain things like access to the BIOS and the ability to turn off USB storage and that sort of thing. Plus, it gives you the advanced centralized configuration, which before we didn't have for Defender. You couldn't administer it centrally, so Plan 1 brought that about. Now, taking it to the next level is Plan 2. And this used to be the only SKU for Defender for Endpoint, and it was called ATP, Advanced Threat Protection. But that's been rebranded as Defender for Endpoint Plan 2, and it incorporates 4 new boxes of security. The first is threat and vulnerability management. And what that does is it gives you a view. Here, let me switch to this other screen here. It gives you a view into your endpoints and their levels of vulnerability. So it looks at real-time threats and risk. Like it does software inventory. It looks for weaknesses in those different softwares, and it gives you recommendations for remediation. And you can set up remediation activities, or you can go manually fix those. So that's something that's added with Plan 2 is this threat and vulnerability management feature. The other box that you get here is endpoint detection and response. And I referred to that as EDR. And there were a lot of companies that were leaders in EDR. So let me do this, security EDR leaders. And there were companies like CrowdStrike, Carbon Black, Red Canary, you've heard of them. Here it is, here's a list, FireEye, Cisco AMP, Palo Alto XDR. And well, Microsoft now has become a leader in the security for endpoint area, and they have the endpoint detection and response. Now, what does that mean? Endpoint detection and response, I refer to it as looking for the needle in the haystack. And what this does is you need to shift your mindset. And here I'm inspired by this assume breach mindset. Defender for Endpoint continually collects activity. And some of that activity, in fact, most of it is going to be safe. It's normal user activity. But sometimes the system or the threat hunters, which are people who look through this data, start to detect certain patterns, or there may be incidents that are triggered that are considered security-based incidents. And so this way you can look for things beyond the typical antivirus, anti-malware. Now maybe you're looking for the hidden hacker that has breached someone's computer, and they may have dropped a rootkit or something on that machine that allows them to connect to it remotely. And that may not be detected by traditional antivirus. So this detects, endpoint detection and response, detects all that type of activity and gives it to your threat hunters so they can look for anomalies and respond to incidents. Now, another thing, as far as response, Plan 2 gives you the ability to automate your responses. So, for example, I'll just give you a simple one. If the system detects a certain activity, it can trigger an automatic response to reboot the computer. That's just a very simple example, but that's how that would work. Usually, though, endpoint detection and response is a huge responsibility for an organization. You need to have dedicated individuals that continually look for malicious or malintending activities. And then they have to make sense of those activities and then trigger a response, whether it's automated or manual. So there are companies that are full time into the response category that you can outsource to, that you can hire through Microsoft, or you can hire your own people and build your own security operations center to threat hunt and respond. Okay, the next box here is automatic investigation and remediation. So I just want to click over here and overview what that is. So it's a lot of the same tools and processes that security analysts use. And when there is a sort of a breach or an incident, automated investigations can occur. And what that means is that the system is trying to put together linked events. They're looking for correlation so that you can try and determine causation. And when you find all these different related activities, then you start to piece together what's going on. And is it real or is it malicious? Or is it something you need to take further action? So this is what automated investigation is. You can set it up over time to do more and more automation with your input. Of course, you need to teach it how to be automated. For example, if you're trying to detect a certain file, you have to tell it what file you're looking for. Or if you're looking for an action to be created based on an alert, you have to tell it which alert you're looking for. And then the investigation is usually manually started by your security team, but there'll be notes here with this incident that you can fill out. And then later, if it's something that can be automated, you can put that in there. And then finally, the Microsoft threat experts. This is really just access to Microsoft threat experts. And when you're in your console and you're threat hunting, you may find that it's overwhelming or too much for you to do. So Microsoft has offered this as an outsourced service. It's a managed threat hunting service that runs with Defender for Endpoint, and it gives you the peace of mind that you don't have to watch all of this activity. Microsoft will do it for you, and they'll notify you when there's something to be concerned about. So you don't have to look for the needle in the haystack. Microsoft threat experts will do that. And then you need to work with experts on demand or with a partner or with your internal IT security team to determine how to respond if something is detected. So that's something that usually costs a little extra, but you do have access to it here with Defender for Endpoint Plan 2. And then, of course, it builds upon Plan 1 and gives you the same centralized configuration and administration. You can integrate other tools using APIs that are native to the apps. And the Defender for Endpoint client works across all platforms. You can install it on Windows, Windows 10 and 11, even Windows Server, Mac OS, Android, and iOS. So Defender for Endpoint Plan 2 is the maximum security you can get from Microsoft when it comes to endpoint. And it costs a little bit more than Plan 1, but you get so much more. But remember that because of so much more, you need to be conscious of who's going to look after it. And that's the big decision point here. It's not about spending the extra $2 to $3 per machine to get these features. It's who's going to look at all this data, make sense of it, and respond to it. And that's a big decision for your organization.
How do these differ from Defender for Business?
Okay, that's a great question. Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, Plan 1 and Plan 2, are considered enterprise plans. These are meant for larger organizations in the realm of 100 to 5,000 employees type thing and beyond. Microsoft realizes that there's some smaller companies out there. So they've created Microsoft Defender for Business, which incorporates a lot of the same features that are in Plan 2. So, for example, you do get the attack surface reduction, the next generation protection, centralized administration, but you also get a bit of the threat and vulnerability management and the endpoint detection and response. The beautiful part of Microsoft Defender for Business, though, is that Microsoft guides you through a wizard that sets up all the key settings in the background on your behalf. So it is really beneficial for a small business that doesn't have an IT department or maybe one IT person to go use Defender for Business and walk through the wizard and accept all of the settings that Microsoft recommends. So it's the simplicity and ease of setup, plus then the ongoing ease of administration. And finally, Defender for Business incorporates with a new managed service tool that we get to use called Microsoft Lighthouse. And Lighthouse allows us to manage your Defender for Business. So those customers that use Microsoft Business Premium can add on Microsoft Defender for Business, and Finchloom can then manage it for you. We can be your security operations center, look after your alerts, and tell you how to respond to them. We can also manage the configurations and the rollout using that wizard that we talked about. And we can make sure that there's full coverage across all the devices being used in your organization. So those are some of the benefits of Defender for Business. It's really meant for the smaller organization, let's say between 50 and 250 users. If you have more users than 200, typically it's good to go with the enterprise plan and use Endpoint Plan 1 or Plan 2.